The Sui Dynasty was a dynasty in China that lasted from 581 to 618 AD. It was one of the shortest dynasties in Chinese history, but had many good accomplishments, such as reuniting China and building the Grand Canal. Its two rulers, Sui Wendi and Sui Yangdi, were instrumental in many of these advances. Wendi was the first emperor of the Sui Dynasty. He founded the dynasty and was known for his many military campaigns in order to reunite China. In 585, he formed a huge navy with large warships and spike booms. This, along with his already large military force, was crucial in the success of his conquests.
Before the Sui, China was loosely divided into 6 not very strong dynasties: the Zhou in the north, Chen in the south, and many other weaker powers. The Sui was successfully created when these were demolished and united as one. With 518,000 men, 8-pronged attacks, 2 armies, and an even more powerful navy, Wendi was able to sneak into the Chen capital at Nanjing to the Yangtze River and completely demolish them. After defeating the Chen, the Sui turned it into farmland to be used to further the status of the empire.
The Sui also had another challenge facing them, the northern Zhou. The Zhou had already defeated the northern Qi, uniting the northern part of China. Wendi took a different method to conquer them. He married his daughter off to the emperor of the Zhou, and she became the Empress Dowager of northern Zhou. After doing this, he snuck his military in through the east, killed the emperor and 59 princes, and successfully took over the Zhou, thus reuniting China, which had not been done since the Han.
Unfortunately for Wendi, he didn't live too long after this. His son Yangdi got a little too anxious for power and murdered him in order to get to the throne.
However, the Sui had more military campaigns under Yangdi that weren't so successful. He attempted to overthrow the Champa dynasty in Vietnam, but was driven out by diseases like malaria and didn't really destroy anything. Additionally, they tried to defeat the Goguryeo dynasty in Korea. Yangdi was not impressed by his defeat in Vietnam and wanted to make sure this didn't happen again. In order to ensure this, he created one of the hugest armies China had ever had, with up to 3,000 warships, 1.2 million infantry, 50,000 cavalry, 50,000 artillery, and more. Despite this enormous army and 4 separate expeditions into Korea, the Sui miserably failed and lost not only lots of men, but lots of the people's trust in them as a viable empire. This later heavily contributed to the fall of the Sui.
In addition to these many military conquests were many legal reforms. The Sui political system largely followed the model of the Qin. They largely centralized China, thanks to conquest, reintroduced the civil service exams, took measures to stop corruption through term limits for bureaucrats, undermined regional patricians, sent out tax bureaucrats, and standardized currency.
Since China was finally stable, economic stability could finally take place. Wendi and Yangdi both attempted to level the economic playing field and increase agricultural productivity. One of the ways they did this was through introducing the equal field system, which basically meant that the government owned all the land and then distributed to people based on their ability to produce labor.
Religiously, Emperor Wendi took on a role similar to Ashoka in India. His Buddhist beliefs led him to encourage the spread of it throughout the empire, and many relics of Buddha distributed all over China.
Culturally, the Sui wasn't terribly unique. It largely served as a transitional period between the Han and the Tang. Poetry continued to be written, but it was nothing special. Art and painting started to flourish again. However, most energy was focused on expanding and uniting the empire and developing major public works projects.
The Sui dynasty was also famous for its extravagant construction projects. They were responsible for building the Grand Canal, the largest canal in the world, and repairing the Great Wall. Of course, these projects came with a cost. Just like how the Sui resembled many of the Qin dynasty's legal policies, they also followed their example in building infrastructure. Thousands of peasants were conscripted at little to no pay, and although the canal helped transport food and materials to people more easily, the increased taxation to fund this project and the burden placed on the peasants hurt the empire greatly.
The Sui dynasty was relatively short, and if fingers are to be pointed at anyone for its fall, it would be at Yangdi. Just about everything he did contributed to the fall of the dynasty. He was a bit of a tyrant, so nobody really liked him. His very heavy taxes and high conscription rates of peasants made China poor and despised by its own people. Additionally, the epic failures of campaigns to Champa Vietnam, and especially Koguryo Korea, not only humiliated the country, but left many dead and China penniless. Because of all this, it wasn't long before Yang Di was killed by his advisors. The throne was then passed on to Gongji, who ruled for less than a year before the empire completely fell. He soon gave up and yielded China to Li Yuan, or Emperor Gaozi, who started the magnificent Tang Dynasty, opening up the doors to the golden age of Chinese history.